Welcome to Student Learning Objective Training Module, Depth of Knowledge, Part 2. I'm Jennifer Gates, School Instructional Specialist. Thank you for joining us for this module, and remember, all are available at your convenience on the SLO Blackboard shell. Our learning objectives: to come away with a strong understanding of Dr. Webb's Depth of Knowledge, or DOK, understanding the characteristics of each of the 4 DOK levels, review sample standards and assessment items based on the levels, and to prepare you to identify, write, and support DOK-based assessments using SLOs. What is an SLO? It's a student learning objective, a measurement of 2 points in time showing student growth. It's used by all teachers in Georgia of non-tested subjects and helps to tell the story of how a classroom instruction is effective, informs teacher growth, as well as professional goals related to instruction. In this module, we'll go deeply into levels 1 through 4. And here you can see the natural progression of the levels as the student consistently applies increasing levels of cognitive challenge to meet their own learning potential, as well as the demands of the standard. An example at the elementary level involves this fable. As you can see, each task uses the word describe, but the context in which it is used changes the level of thinking, so that the students have to use in order to complete the task is increasingly more complex. Pause the module at this point to read the fable and consider the DOK levels and the application of describe in context. Hit play when you're ready to resume. DOK Level 1 is recall and reproduction. There's no cognitive challenge here beyond the simple recall of facts or information. For example, in multiple choice scenarios, students can select the correct answer based on existing knowledge. If they don't know the answer, in other words, it's unlikely they'll select the correct response unless through random selection or through guessing. DOK Level 2 is skills and concepts. It goes beyond recall, reproduction, or answer selection and location. At Level 2, students are generally comparing and contrasting, finding the differences between items, etc. They may also be applying more than one concept when responding or classifying items into categories, sorting, even selecting responses that describe and or explain relationships, or a lack thereof, meaning they'd indicate non-examples as well as examples. Level 2 DOK goes from the what to the why. DOK Level 3 is skills and concepts. Here it goes beyond the simple why in response to a question and asks for explanation or justification. This allows for students to use planning, reasoning, and higher order thinking. Elements like analysis and evaluation give students an opportunity to use real-world problems that may have more than one possible outcome. Understanding the supporting evidence beyond the response is critical at DOK Level 3. At this level, students should be using in-depth understanding of a concept, skill, or standard to find an answer or produce a product. DOK Level 4 is extended thinking. Where DOK 3, tasks and questions, focus on deep understanding in order to respond, DOK 4 takes that information and builds on it yet further, going from one source to multiple sources, possibly involving multiple texts, concepts, items, and disciplines to form a final product. DOK 4 demands longer amounts of time, extension of understanding and context, and integration across disciplines. The student may create, innovate, and expand reasoning and use high-level thinking the entire time at DOK Level 4. These assessments do not have one right answer, and often the results are unpredictable because they're based on real-life scenarios and problems. These are authentic learning experiences that can involve collaboration, extensive understanding, as well as the design for use and for problem solving. Now let's try out using the idea of verbs in context. Here we'll try it with the verb identify used across all 4 DOK levels. At Level 1, it's to identify essential information needed to accomplish a task. At Level 2, information in a passage supported by facts. At 3, the appropriateness of an argument using supporting evidence. And finally, at 4, interrelationships in more than one literary work. You can see how that single verb is transformed when seen in context. Now let's put it to work at the elementary level, this time with a set of simple questions. Review the questions and determine, is the correct response DOK level 1, 2, or 3? Remember to pause the module here and click play when you're ready to resume to see the answers. How well can you identify the DOK level? Question 1, the correct response is DOK level 3. For question 2, it's level 1. And for the third item, it's DOK level 2. Let's look at Karen Hess's cognitive rigor matrix, this one for math and science. They're also available to download and print for reference from the Blackboard SLO shell. Dr. Hess compares the revised Bloom's to Webb's DOK levels and provides curricular examples. For example, using analyze or evaluate on the revised Bloom's at DOK level 2, a student would engage in categorizing, classifying, organizing, comparing and contrasting, selecting appropriate responses, interpreting information so as to select the correct response and consider extension. And for a closer look at the matrices, remember you can return to the Blackboard SLO shell and locate the supporting resources under Cognitive Rigor Matrices. DOK levels can be cumulative though, because each level builds on the previous level. With DOK, the highest level of cognitive processing for a standard is called the ceiling. The ceiling is also the highest DOK level at which a standard can be assessed for item development. Think of it as the highest level of knowledge students are expected to demonstrate on an assessment. Determining the ceiling helps to ensure the learning goes as deep as the standard needs to be. Here, Dr. Hess herself explains the differences between the revised Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge.
Like a taxonomy that 4 is better than 3, is better than 2, is better than 1. It's 4 different ways that you interact with content. If at a level 1 you are recalling and reproducing information that you memorized, if you have it at hand, if you go on Jeopardy and you can hit that buzzer and you can answer those questions because you can access that information quickly, you are using DOK1 thinking. You are reproducing or recalling, or you can locate it, or you can perform. I learned how to measure, so I can measure anything now. DOK2 he calls basic application of skills and concepts. And here you have to know a little bit more than just what you can recall, because you're taking maybe one piece of information and you're applying it in some other context. So for example, in mathematics, you might have to understand how the graph or the table is set up so you can find the numbers you need and you can put them together and find an average. So you've got the concept of I know a graph, I've got the concept of finding an average, and I can put those two together and solve a pretty routine but basic word problem. So it's still routine, but it's applying a couple of ideas. In ELA, a DOK1 question for ELA folks is a right there question. I can find that answer in the text. I can find the name of the character or the whatever. But a DOK2 is tell me what happened in the story, give me more of a summary, sequence the events. That's a think and search question. I can still find all of that information in the text, but I have to put it together. So I have to say, I'm looking for an event, I'm looking for another event, I'm looking for how they solved the problem. If you're in a first grade classroom, you might be using that graphic organizer, somebody wanted but so. So who in the story was a somebody, what did they want to do, what was the problem, what was the but, and so what happened. So that's a very simple way of saying we're going to find that information and put it together to summarize. That would be a DOK2. It shows a relationship maybe between two things. In science, it's like if I do this, then that will happen. It's making a prediction. A hypothesis is a depth of knowledge too. I think if we speed up the car, or if we raise the height of the ramp, the car will go farther or it will go slower. I'm basing it on something I already know. DOK3 is strategic thinking. That requires using reasoning, using planning. It may be that there's more than one way to approach the problem. It may be that there's more than one right answer. If you were my class and we read a novel and I said, what's the theme? And why do you think that's the theme? You might have one idea of a theme. There might be multiple themes in a well-written novel. There might be multiple correct answers as long as you can support your understanding. That's the key to number 3, DOK3, is you can provide justification and support for your opinion, your judgment, your critique. If I said, what's the easiest way to solve this math question, this math problem, you would have to show me some support for why this approach is more effective, more efficient than another. Usually this is when things become more abstract, more complex, and non-routine. So it's playing the game. You know something about the other players, you maybe know the record of the other team, but you don't know in any given instance how that's all going to come together. It's non-routine. And in a classroom, it's asking students a non-routine question. I'm not just going to ask you what's the average of these numbers. I'm going to say, would it be more appropriate to use the mean, mode, or median? Which kind of average is the best way to represent this real-world situation? Oh, now I've got to think about all 3, and I've got to have a reason why I picked the one I did. That's different than just saying, what's the mode? I'm giving you the data set. DOK4 is extended thinking. It usually takes more time because it is more complex, but it's not just time that makes it a DOK4. So if you're checking the temperature every day and writing it on a wall chart, and it takes you a month to finish doing that, you're still doing DOK1 every day. But if we were saying, well, let's collect some data over time because we want to see if the stream behind the school is a healthy stream, what is the data we need to collect, how are we going to collect it, how are we going to analyze that data, and how are we going to draw conclusions from multiple data sets. That's a DOK4 kind of task. It's usually more of a project type of thing. It's usually a culminating kind of thing. It's often group work, project work. A DOK4 is more like a research paper where I've got to go and read multiple sources, interview people maybe, where a DOK3 is I'm going to write an essay. It's going to take less time. I'm going to use fewer sources of information to be able to produce that. So do you see how that's not really the same as Bloom? Because you could see it getting deeper, 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 deeper.
Let's take a moment now to reflect. How well do you understand DOK? Can you define DOK, compare revised Bloom's and Webb's DOK, briefly describe the distinctions of each DOK level? Pause the module to reflect on your learning and hit play when you're ready to resume. To summarize now, DOK measures rigor and cognitive complexity, not difficulty. Each level can only be attained after achieving the previous level, meaning lower DOK levels need to be mastered before it's possible for a student to move to higher levels like DOK 3 and 4. As such, the student cannot perform at the standards DOK level, and if not, they have not mastered that standard. Finally, DOK, its use ensures the standards level of complexity matches the assessment item. All of these aspects are critical for SLO development. Reviewing our learning objectives for this module, you should now have a strong understanding of Webb's depth of knowledge, be able to identify the distinguishing characteristics of each of the 4 DOK levels, be able to review sample standards and assessment items based on each of the 4 DOK levels with understanding and knowledge, and also have the foundation to write, identify, and support DOK-based assessments. In the words of Confucius, a person who learns but does not think is lost. But even more dangerous is a person who thinks but does not learn. Both learning and thinking are critical for our professional development, as well as the achievement, engagement, and success of our students. At any time, for more information about the Cobb Keys evaluation system, visit the website www.cobbk12.org/Cobb Keys. And for more information about depth of knowledge, you can use descriptors DOK and depth of knowledge in your favorite search engine. Visit our supporting resources, the Teacher and Leader Effectiveness Division at the Georgia Department of Education, and the SLO Blackboard Shell in Cobb County. Thank you for visiting this learning module. We appreciate the effort and energy you put into SLO development.